This is Bruce Morris, KPOV DJ and station manager. On August 23rd, KPOV aired a special interview about an important film coming to Bend on August 25th. The film is Prognosis, Notes on Living. It is being brought to Bend through a partnership with the Peaceful Presence Project, Out Central Oregon, and Bend Film. The film will air August 25th, 7 to 9 p.m. at the Unitarian Church here in Bend, out on Skyliners Road.
It's a movie filled with love and joy and just with the reality of a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah, and it's like this really awesome example of how to live well if you get a serious illness. How do you make the most of that and live like, okay, this is what I've got, and this is how I'm going to just live every day to its fullest.
I spoke with Aaron Collins of the Peaceful Presence Project and Jamie Nesbitt of Out Central Oregon about the film.
So you asked what we would hope came out of seeing this film. And for me, I hope that people see that it's really important to ask for help and to accept support from others, and that you don't have to go through it alone. Whether it's you with a serious illness or a loved one or a friend who has a serious illness, that it doesn't have to happen alone or in a silo, that there is a lot of support out in the community, and being willing to take that help really eases the suffering and the burden that goes along with it.
Here is our interview. I guess, Aaron, let's start with you. You are the programming director and NEDA proficient end-of-life doula. I'll have you explain that in just a second. At the Peaceful Presence Project here in Central Oregon. What is the Peaceful Presence Project, and what do you do for a living and in relation to this organization?
Sure. So I am that NEDA is the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance. And so, as you said, I'm a NEDA proficient end-of-life doula, and it's just a national kind of recognition of a certain level of competency as an end-of-life doula. And for the organization, the Peaceful Presence Project, we have a mission to reimagine the way that our community talks about, plans for, and experiences serious illness and the end of life. So as the program director, I really help to develop and deliver curriculum for clinicians, for community members, and folks who want to become end-of-life doulas, to give them the opportunity to be better prepared to support someone with serious or terminal illness.
All right. And just to round out a little bit, you are also a registered nurse and have your bachelor's in nursing and just received recently your master's degree in nursing.
Yes.
So congratulations for that.
Thank
and
you.
A yoga teacher, which we love. So can you just, Aaron, tell us what motivated you in your life to really dedicate your life now to end-of-life care?
Thanks for that question. When I was 24, I had the opportunity to return home to Colorado as my grandmother was dying. And at the time, I was an aspiring writer and living in the big city of Portland, Oregon. And I went home and sat with my grandmother for about a week. And I would just go to the hospital and visit her each day. And I saw the nurses. She was in an within hospital hospice unit. So she was at the end of her life. And the hospice nurses were phenomenal. And I just watched the compassion and care that they gave to her. And something in me said, that's how I want to show up in the world. That's how I want to be in relationship with other humans. It did take me another 10 years after that before I went to nursing school after some travel, but nursing school with the intention of becoming a hospice nurse. And then I've been a nurse for 15 years in both oncology care and hospice and end-of-life or palliative care, and have really just, found that that's my passion. It's what I'm good at. And then realized that we needed to do something in the community to ease the suffering that comes for a lot of people at end of life because they haven't prepared. And that's folks who are in the community who haven't accepted death and dying. They haven't planned for it. And it also applies to our clinicians who typically in medical and nursing school are not trained in end-of-life care. They're not trained in palliative care. And so I saw a real need to improve that as well, thus getting a master's degree in nursing education to try and make a shift in how we deliver that curriculum so that every clinician is prepared when they go into practice to support people as they face serious and terminal illness.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. We're also joined by Jamie Nesbitt, of Vice President now of Out Central Oregon. And so, Jamie, can you talk about Out Central Oregon and the work you do, and then why Out Central Oregon is part of the team bringing this movie to Bend?
Yeah, absolutely. Out Central Oregon is a LGBTQ advocacy group that a few of us started almost 5 years ago. After moving to Bend about 6.5 years ago, my partner and I knew that there was an LGBT community that was local and within Bend in Central Oregon, but they weren't very visible. And we felt that was the best way to get some acceptance and to get a more vibrant LGBTQ community was to get that community to be visible. And I think our biggest approach that has led to, I think, our successes has been that we didn't do that alone. We partnered with a lot of other organizations and businesses. We've even partnered with Deschutes County Health to try to increase, LGBTQ specific healthcare issues that the county can deal with. And through the years, our partnerships have led to our organizations expanding. We promote not only our own events that we are producers of, but we promote as many of other LGBTQ specific events and activities and initiatives. Through the years, we've developed an extremely deep social media reach, and I think that's a huge value that we add to our community as we go forward, and certainly in the past.
And Jamie, what inspired, motivated you to become an activist for the LGBTQ plus community?
I think I've always been an activist throughout my life in some form or another, whether it was doing car washes in 5th grade to raise money for an organization, and through doing like various charity bicycle rides and runs. I've been a board member and an executive committee member for a national HIV/AIDS organization that's based in D.C. called AIDS United, where they have a huge public policy committee because they're located on Capitol Hill, essentially. But they also do a lot of capacity building and grant making to close to 250 organizations around the U.S. I think that organization and my experiences with them has been one of the greatest unexpected aspects in my life, because I've literally met some of the true largest leaders in HIV and AIDS advocacy and care within the nation.
Just describe this movie. What is it about? You want to start, Aaron? Or?
Sure, I can start. It's Prognosis, Notes on Living. So in that title, you can hear that one of the main characters gets a prognosis, gets a diagnosis of a terminal or a serious illness, And so it's really about that experience. What is it like to receive a diagnosis, to have to make decisions around that diagnosis, to live with treatment? But also, what does it mean to live well while facing a serious illness? And that's really, I think Jamie will speak to that too, that's really what is so beautiful in this film, is that there are sad parts to it. And there are difficult and challenging parts to it, just as there are in real life living with serious illness. But there's also a real opportunity to live well and to live fully as somebody faces a serious illness. Jamie, what would you add?
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think one of the reasons that Out Central Oregon jumped at the opportunity to partner with your organization, Aaron, and with Bend Film is the subject matter of the film actually relates to a lesbian, a very well-known documentary filmmaker, award-winning, in fact. So while the film is relevant to the entire population as far as understanding end of life, prognoses that are end of life, to change that. Sorry. I think it adds an interesting perspective because the character is a partnered lesbian living in San Francisco, and you just get to see the love and the support within her family, with her kids, and within her community at large, again, from a queer perspective, which is a little bit unique, which I think is one of the greatest things about this movie.
I agree.
Can y'all talk about how is that experience? You, Jamie, you described unique, the experience of someone who is LGBTQ plus going through this process, and Aaron, I think you mentioned it too as well. How is that unique? What are the differences?
Well, I think the film is in San Francisco, so I think the level of care that she could get as a queer person, and also with access to a facility like UCSF, is pretty stellar. But I think it reminded me that for a lot of queer individuals, having great access to healthcare in more rural towns may not have been nearly as easy as Jasnov did in the movie, let alone have the support that she had with her very LGBTQ-friendly family and friends. And I think it's a perspective to remember when we watch the movie, that even though her prognosis and diagnosis is what it was, she was in a position of having a lot of support. And I think, to me, that was a message that when we're all going to be faced with either a loved one or even ourselves at that time of our life, having that support is critical.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, as Jamie said, that the director or the star of the film, so to speak, is partnered and supported. But the statistics aren't, that's not the main picture that we see with LGBTQ older adults, in that the statistics show that actually they're twice as likely to be single as they age and to live alone. They're 4 times less likely to have children. And as we may know that children are often who are there to support their aging parents. Often more estranged, more likely to be estranged from their family members who would be a support circle, or even be someone who could help make medical decisions, someone who could be a caregiver. But they're also more likely to be caregivers for friends. And something that there was a big kind of a briefing paper that came out this year by the organization called Age Plus, that showed that in Oregon, 70% of respondents to this kind of survey of LGBTQ adults in Oregon, 70% of the respondents stated that they have 3 or more people in their support circle. So it's a good news that in a supportive circle, which is what I think was really compelling in this film, was how much her community showed up for her and how important that is. And so for someone who isn't partnered and doesn't have family or is estranged from their family, how important that support network is, and how important it is for our support networks to be knowledgeable or to have some level of skill or practical wisdom around helping their friends through a serious or terminal illness.
And so you spoke at the beginning of creating compassionate community.
Yeah.
Right, around people in this situation in their life. And so I wonder, making the connection of people with a smaller or maybe even non-existent support circle, this compassionate community helps to take care of those people. Is that part of what we're seeing and what the work y'all are doing?
Absolutely. And I think that another interesting thing is that we're hosting the film at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, which has also really said, okay, what do we do to bring this issue to light? And I think what's interesting is the work that we do is getting these community members, these circles, to be to have that practical wisdom. And that could be groups of friends. It could be groups of neighbors and neighborhoods, but it's also really largely faith and religious communities where people find that support on a weekly or monthly basis. Those are some of the really important community members who can get this skill set, who can learn how to be more supportive in that compassionate community format. It also involves, getting involved with that the local government has a better idea of what's needed and what needs to be supported, that the health systems are able to refer out to community resources. The fact this Dr. Alan Kelleher, who created this compassionate community model of care, is famously quoted as saying that for someone who's living with serious illness, only 5% of their time is spent with a medical professional. So 95% of the time, they're on their own. And if it's somebody who is estranged from their family or doesn't have a partner, is living alone, what do we as a community do to support them in that 95% of the time? So that's what Peaceful Presence is really here to do, is help support people in the 95% of the time that they aren't in front of a medical professional, and to make sure that there are community members who can also be there and be supportive.
Yeah, so there's a lot of power in looking at the 95%.
Yeah.
Right? It seems like that's something that I've not heard, and have been through a couple of relatives with the hospice process. And when you say it, it's like, yeah, that's right. Most of the time it's somebody else. And so it's a powerful focus on what needs to happen the vast majority of the time. I'm wondering, Jamie, and I'll ask you too, Aaron, what is your experience watching this film? And then it's sort of related way, what are you hoping other people will get out of it when they go watch?
I mean, the film was beautiful to me, and I feel absolutely fortunate to have seen it and to be able to see it again this Thursday night. I've been fortunate in my life, I guess, in some ways, that I've never had to deal with a loved one in close proximity that was dying. I was either far enough away that it was just not possible to me to be there as a primary at-home caregiver or something similar to that. But this movie, as I'm getting older myself, this movie and my parents as well, it just sheds some light and some awareness on my part that every single person on the planet goes through this process. We are all going to die at some point. We are all going to have a loved one close to us who is going to die or be diagnosed with a potentially terminal illness. I mean, I feel that not even thinking of myself getting that a diagnosis, but just as a caregiver, there's a burden on them as well. And I think having that conversation, I think is going to, what I'm hoping is going to be a big outcome from screening this film. Granted, watching Deborah Chasnov's processing her own imminent mortality was powerful, and that definitely is what the film showed. But I think having a insightful eye to her family and her friends and watching what they also have to go through as someone who is supporting this person who is dealing with emotions and concerns and fears that until you're in that place, you have no idea what that experience is like.
So, Aaron, what is that for you? What's the experience of the movie?
Yeah.
What are you hoping people will come away with?
Well, when I first heard about the movie, and I will say that a lot of different films have come and gone and kind of come across my desk around end of life. And this was absolutely the best made film that I've ever seen around death and dying. It's just really personal and remarkable. And I had a similar experience in that I have actually been, as a nurse who specialized in end-of-life care, I've been present for hundreds of deaths. It never gets any easier. They're always emotional and touching. And as Jamie said, it was the caregiver that really spoke to me in this film. And that burden that comes with caregiving for someone with a serious illness, especially when it's a partner, and what that does for relationship and how difficult it is to be in relationship and be caregiving and be trying to make medical decisions. They navigated it really beautifully and with a great support network and with people to talk to. And that's not always the case.
So the compassionate community, I'm going to keep referring to that because I love it. The compassionate community is for people going through the dying process, but also they're closer in support systems, right? The caregivers.
Yes.
The compassionate community is there to help everyone, I guess, was what I would say.
Absolutely. Okay. That's, we look at it, the compassionate community, you kind of look at it in this, it's kind of, they call it a socio-ecological model. And it's just like, there's a circle that's the dying or seriously ill person, but they have a circle of people around them and they need support. And then there's community members who are able to support that caring circle, and the medical system can support them, and public health can support them, and all the way out to public policy to create this larger, like you said, it's called a compassionate community, and that we all have a responsibility to take care of each other as humans.
And because we're on radio and not TV, I want to tell you that we're all sitting around here making concentric circles with our hands.
We are.
In case you're wondering to describe all of this. Just wanted to let you in on that little bit of what we're doing. I have a question that it occurred to me earlier, but I want to ask, what is the difference, if there is, between an end-of-life doula and an end-of-life care nurse?
Yeah, so an end-of-life doula is a non-medical companion. So they're trained in understanding, one, having a real clear understanding of their own relationship with death and dying, a real clear kind of practical wisdom around how to listen and be supportive for someone who is facing serious illness. The training that we do, they gain a real understanding of family dynamics and how to support other family members and caregivers as they are supporting someone with serious illness, as well as providing advanced care planning, how to plan ahead for all this inevitable mortality that we all have. So doulas are really non-medical, community-based companions who can navigate serious illness with someone and all the way through the end of life with someone.
And so getting back to the 95%,
yes.
I want to take it in a little bit slightly different direction, which is that fairly obvious that this movie's sad at some point, I think. But what's it like the rest of the way? I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. I mean, what are the emotions that you're feeling, that you're seeing, that people are sharing in the movie or demonstrating in the movie throughout?
Yeah, Jamie, maybe you can.
I can start that. There's a lot of love and there's a lot of support. I know that sounds very obvious, but I think that's how it starts. There's hope from the initial diagnosis that we can get through the treatments. So the family of Deborah and her close, her compassionate community are all hopeful that the treatments she'll respond to the treatments and that this will all just go away, and at some point her life will go back to normal. But as the movie progresses, you realize that's not the case. And so sadness, realization, frustration starts setting in. And there is a point in the movie where Deborah really hits an emotional moment of just almost a breakdown, if you will, but a necessary one, I would argue, where, after, I don't remember how long after her initial diagnosis, but it had been some time where, having to go to the hospital 2 or 3 times a week to manage this and get a scan on this and get a treatment for this and another test and all of this heavy-handedness, she just kind of just sobbed, a true heart-wrenching sob. And I think that's, for me, where the movie really takes a change emotionally, when I think the realization among all of our compassionate caregivers of that inevitability that we had hoped we could delay was now much closer than we had hoped for.
Yeah, I think, you just kind of brought up for me the difference in this documentary film that's sharing this experience versus a Hollywood film that goes through the same experience, and they get better at the end, and
right.
And they go and take their big family vacation, and this is more reality based. And I really appreciate that as the audience members, we get to experience all those emotions that they go through, and we get to experience the reality of what they are going through. And it's all the emotions that Jamie said. And there's also humor, right? And they bring, because there's always, funny things that go on in the reality and the kind of human existence. And so there's definitely the humor quality as well.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Erin, because that is very true. It's while we might be portraying it as something of a very depressing movie, it's actually not. After watching it and during watching it, it made me sad for the characters, obviously, and the reality of what you were viewing.
And you talked about, Erin, the concept of palliative care at the end of life. And can you describe what that is and why is that important for you in your work with this?
Yeah, so it's palliative care is a concept that is often misunderstood as end-of-life care, and palliative care is really about its quality of life care. And so it's appropriate for anybody who is diagnosed with a serious illness from the time they're diagnosed to have a palliative care physician who is involved in the team and is constantly looking at how does today, how are you getting by today? Are you able to do the things you want to do? Are your symptoms manageable? So that somebody really has an eye on, gosh, if you're having a lot of pain or you're having a lot of nausea as you navigate this illness, what can we do differently to make sure that you don't have as much nausea or you don't have as much pain? If it's really important for you as you navigate this illness, it's really important for you to get to this family reunion. What can we do to make sure that you feel well enough to go and do that? It's all about this holistic perspective of what do you need in your mind, in your physical body, in your spirit to make sure that you're living as well as possible as you navigate that illness. Then it's, then once that kind of shift happens where okay, maybe things aren't going as well and we aren't getting, this treatment is actually decreasing your quality of life. Is that time then to say, okay, I'm ready to stop treatment. What does it look like to now go to hospice care? And so it's another way to have good eyes on when is that timing appropriate. And so what's really important for me in palliative care is that it is such an incredible service, and it really does improve the way that people live with serious illness. It really improves their quality of life, and it's just not, it doesn't happen often enough. And so as doulas, and that end-of-life doula is a misnomer because we really want to support people much further upstream so that they are engaged with palliative care and they do have a better quality of life. Yeah, so another great aspect of this event is that at the completion of the film, we have a panel discussion, and we have Dr. Jenny Bleckman, who's a palliative care physician in town, myself, and a family caregiver who is currently providing care for her partner who is dealing with serious illness. So we'll have each of the panelists share their perspective on the themes in the film, but then it'll be open for question and answer and to really hopefully get the audience engaged and in discussing the themes and the issues in the film. So we're really excited to have it be an engaging event.
Thanks for listening to this KPOV podcast. KPOV is community radio for the high desert of Central Oregon. For more information and our program schedule, please visit kpov.org. We value your feedback. Drop us a note at podcasts@kpov.org.